All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Tim Black at Night Show. This is No Sellouts. That means no sellouts are allowed. I have a great guest tonight. Yes, I do. She is a candidate in the Senate race in California. She's got some ideas she wants to share and about her platform, folks. Give it up for my friend and yours, Alison Hartson.
Hello, Tim.
Hey, Alison, how you feeling?
Oh, feeling great. Glad to be here.
That's great. That's great. You're in California, so the weather's always nice, right?
It sure is. Yes. Even when it's bad, it's nice.
Even when it's, you know what? I appreciate you saying that. There are people, they get a 50-degree day in Cali, like, it was bad today. You don't know, babe.
It's my mother. She's like, it's so cold. 70 degrees.
Oh, God.
I know.
I love it, man. So I hear that you, I don't know, you decided you were bored with life. You wanted to devote it to politics. Tell me why you want to run for Senate.
Yeah, I was just sitting around twiddling my thumbs. What else am I going to do?
Right.
Well, most recently, I was the national director of a nonprofit organization. It's a political organization known as wolf-pac. And the main or sole purpose of wolf-pac is to end political corruption, get money out of politics, and to do this in the most aggressive, most progressive way possible through an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that will overturn Citizens United and related cases. And I started out with wolf-pac actually as a volunteer. I was a public high school teacher for 10 years prior to this. And it was through my experience as a teacher. I taught in a low-income district. It's serving predominantly first and second generation students from Mexico. And I taught English. I also designed and taught an intervention program for students who were at risk of not graduating high school. And so it was through my experience there that I saw how deep rooted and systemic the problems are that we are facing, whether it's healthcare, income inequality, you name it. It's really comes down to so much of who's funding whose campaign. Just follow the money. And once I realized that our root cause of the problems is deeper than education, then I decided to get involved in this movement. And so I organized thousands of volunteers throughout the state of California, successfully led our measure through the California state legislature, and then did the same in several other states. And so I eventually made the difficult decision to step down as an educator and do this full time. And then it was through my experience traveling the country for up to 10 months out of every year. I was working in red states, blue states, purple states. I was on the ground in 2016 talking to Bernie supporters, Clinton supporters, Trump supporters. And everybody is talking about being frustrated and really disillusioned by what their party is doing, whichever party you're talking about. And so I realized through my experience in the political world there that if we're going to get the policies passed that we need, we have to do it ourselves. We have to run for office. We need to do it by being uncorrupted and unbought. We need to refuse corporate money, refuse all dark money, all PAC money, and insist on running our campaigns in the same way that we are fighting for. And so I decided to run for this particular seat against Dianne Feinstein because she really is the epitome of the corruption that we're talking about. And I was very surprised to learn that she was running again. And what we need is very bold progressives who are going to unapologetically run for office at every single level and really show them that we're not going to stand down. We're here to take back our country.
Wow. That's very interesting and also very inspiring now that I think about it, because so you started off as an activist. A volunteer activist working with wolf-pac. TYT's wolf-pac, right?
That's right. The Young Turks.
Yeah, the Young Turks. Wow.
So, Cenk Uygur, the founder and host of the Young Turks, he independently founded wolf-pac. And so I ended up learning about him and TYT through wolf-pac. Most people come to wolf-pac through TYT, but I kind of came in through the back door.
Okay, you did the other way. I get you.
Yeah,
you went the other way. But I'm impressed that you sort of your story kind of sounds a little bit like mine, Alison, because I was just covering like breaking news, issues, social issues, community issues, police brutality, poverty, homelessness, those types of things in breaking stories. And then I started noticing that the problems that I was talking about, they were kind of too big to be fixed by me just talking about them. Like they needed politics to like
policy.
You know what I'm saying? Exactly.
No, that's what happened to me. So my whole life, I have been an activist in one area or another. And it was when I realized, because I sat back as I was teaching, and I thought, how is it possible with the age of the internet? I mean, this is the information age, where we have more access to information than ever before in history. We have our kids, our youth group is so educated, it's insane. I mean, what I had to do to stay ahead of my students, bringing in what they were learning on podcasts more than they were learning in the textbooks. And so I was looking at this, and how is it possible that there are so many more people with empathy in the world who really want the world to be a better place, but we have the worst income inequality in decades? How is that possible? And so when I broke down every single social issue that we care about, it came back to policy. I basically did causal analysis that I was always teaching my students to do. So you break it down to policy, and then you ask yourself, well, what drives the policy? It is the politicians who are going to vote on it, the people who are going to write it, who's writing these policies, by and large, the corporations that have a vested and legal interest to put profit over people. And when you keep following it back that way, it's just impossible to ignore that whatever issue you care about, we have got to address this foundational issue at the same time.
You know, once again, I'm very similar in a way that I understand that the issues that we are facing are just too big to deal with without going the policy route. Either that, or you just exploit the issue from my standpoint, because I'm a commentator. So you just keep talking about every police shooting, you keep talking about all the veterans who die every day, or you actually try to get politicians elected and get the word out so that somebody can change the policy. I would like to say that one of the only criteria I used to have, Alison, when I interviewed a candidate was, do you take PAC money? Do you take dark money? Like, that was the only thing. Like, we could disagree on, 60, 70% of stuff. But if you're taking, dark money or PAC money or whatever, then I can't put you in front of my audience. So I totally relate to wolf-pac and relate to what you're discussing as far as what motivated you and what you think is the biggest problem we have in our government.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. It's just that for me, when any issue that we talk about, whether it's environment or whether it's education or whether it's criminal justice reform or healthcare or income inequality, we have to come back to the root cause. We have to put in the time and the hard conversations to identify the root cause if we're going to actually fix it. I'm a problem solver. I like to solve problems. And so if we only react to the symptom, then not only do we not end up solving it, but we can actually risk exacerbating the problem itself. And so I like what you said, being a commentator, how, talking about it, does it actually fix anything? It goes a really long way to educating and informing people. But I can tell you that Cenk Uygur and J.R. Jackson, I was actually talking to recently with the Young Turks, they spoke about this years ago before wolf-pac was founded, that they feel like they're constantly talking about the same stories over and over and over again. And it only keeps getting worse. And when you're doing the news every day, you're seeing that more than any of us, really. And I mean, very depressing. And so this is what really caused Cenk to become more of an activist, in addition to being a reporter as well.
Well, I definitely get it. So before you worked with wolf-pac, what'd you do? Did you do anything? You were a teacher?
I was a teacher, yes. So I was a public high school teacher. I taught seniors. I taught all grades, actually. But a couple years into it, honestly, I was a little disillusioned with our education system and what I kind of thought teaching would be about. But I entered it when standardized testing was being implemented. And kind of, I guess, counterintuitively, because my teacher pals thought I was a little bit crazy for this, but the academy program that I ended up designing and teaching, this intervention program, is what actually kept me around as an educator for so many years. Because to me, that was really getting at the heart and the root of what's happening in our communities. So I had, in the first year that I had this program, I had students who were arrested for murder, for attempted murder, for crimes, less serious than that, but still very serious. I had kids who were already in gangs or getting ready to go in gangs, struggling with drug addiction, families who were sending their kids from downtown Los Angeles to this city in Garden Grove where I taught to help get them off the streets of downtown LA. And so working with these communities and seeing how this intervention program was literally saving these kids' lives. But a few years into it, these kids were starting to get their grades up and applying for college. And I now have kids from that program who have graduated college, kids or parents who've come to me with tears in their eyes telling me this program saved their child's life. But 2 years into that program, the school wanted to cut the program. But instead, what they ended up doing was they had like a $10 million bond that came in that was invested in computers that would be given to these students that could only be used for their standardized tests. So our class sizes were growing exponentially. We had kids in our classes and the sizes were 30, 40, 45. Some teachers have examples of larger class sizes. That's not possible anywhere, let alone in a low income community. How is it? I don't care how good of a teacher you are. And so it's just one. And I'm sitting back wondering who's making these decisions, who's being accountable for these decisions. And I'm watching the politics of what is driving these decisions to be made by certain people, no matter how much the educators really do have the best of intentions and good hearts. And so I stayed there that long doing that. And it was finally at the end of it all, I couldn't keep looking at my students and answering their question to me, many of them saying, Ms. Hartson, why should I bother to do good in school or to get on the straight and narrow path if I can't afford to go to college anyway? Why should I bother if I can afford to go to college, but I'm going to struggle to find a job afterwards? Or if I find a job, I'm going to struggle with student debt. Why should I bother? And I had a hard time year after year being able to answer that question.
Wow. Tough dilemma when you have real life implications behind these policies that are implemented that we don't agree with. So Alison, I'll tell you, man, it sounds like your heart's in the right place. You have experience that is, germane, even though I don't even look at experience as it has to be in a specific field, because frankly, we got some people in Congress who don't need to be there. I don't care how long they've what degree they have or where they've worked before. But let's move on to like what you want to do for the people, because I tell you, when the word went out that you were coming on the show, here goes one of the things someone said to me, and I'm going to leave their name out. They said, "Oh, that's Cenk's friend. That's the reason why she's running, because Cenk told her to run." What would you say to that person in that type of criticism?
Well, underneath that question is that I'm not capable of thinking for myself. That's a pretty problematic statement. So I'll leave that at that. But what I can tell you is that, Cenk has decided to be he's a volunteer for my campaign, basically, but he is my main advisor to my campaign because he knows firsthand what I am capable of, what I have accomplished. And the biggest thing, have you heard of the Justice Democrats before?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So the biggest thing for the Justice Democrats has been, that you don't take corporate money, you don't take PAC money, that you really, at the very least, you don't have to agree with everything on their platform, but that you, at the very least, are going to fight to get big money out of politics. So if you look their entire field of all of their candidates, 52 candidates, I am the only one of any of them that brings this experience to this voting block that we can have in Congress, that I have specialized working with constitutional scholars, with constitutional lawyers around the entire country, across the political spectrum. I have gotten this legislation passed through several states. I have gotten bipartisan support. I come from the working class. I've been fighting for the working class. All of this combined, it's been a no-brainer for the Justice Democrats and for Cenk Uygur. But I will say, too, that the Justice Democrats put every one of their candidates through some kind of system to vet their candidates. They did the same thing with me as they do with everybody else. But yes, I mean, I don't think that there's anything wrong with supporting somebody that you know that you can trust to do the very thing that you have been fighting for years. Isn't that what we all do? But it was of course my decision of whether or not I was going to do this. And it was not an easy decision to make by any means. I don't enter this lightly, and I don't think any sane person would.
Well, I definitely hear you. I think that you have a strong point. If I encourage someone to do something or thought they were a good person to do whatever it is, they still have to do it. Like, even if someone recommends you for a job, you still got to go out, get the job. Then you got to perform at the job. And we all know it's a grueling endeavor to run for office. I mean, you put your life on hold.
Yes.
It's tough, man. And you're under scrutiny, and people ask you tough questions, probably a lot tougher than the ones I had prepared, because I want to ask you about your platform.
Well, biggest thing for me is Medicare for all. And, but it doesn't stop at Medicare for all. I mean, honestly, it's been difficult to narrow it down to just 3 policy issues because they're all so connected. You've got Medicare for all, you've got $15 minimum wage tied to inflation, you've got a green economy, you've got obviously getting big money out of politics, we have criminal justice reform, we have education reform, we have economic reform. We need to get true progressive tax structure, hold our corporations and the wealthy accountable, bring jobs truly to our communities, give our communities more control and autonomy over the jobs. I want to see our small, medium, large businesses really invested in and turn into cooperatives. That's a really exciting endeavor for me. But all of this has to be done, I believe, by people in office who understand how they're all really, truly connected. For example, if we just run on Medicare for all, and let's say we get Medicare for all, that still doesn't mean that you're going to be able to afford your bills necessarily. We still need a living wage tied to inflation. $15 minimum wage. So let's say we get that federally, which is something that I'm going to be fighting for. I like to say living wage, by the way, because by the time we get it, it's probably going to be higher than $15 an hour. But let's say we just get a living wage, we tie it to inflation, but we don't have Medicare for all. You're still going to be struggling to pay your bills because of how expensive healthcare is. You have a living wage, and now we have Medicare for all, but we don't get education reform. So you still have a number of problems that you're dealing with, like the school to prison pipeline, systemic racism that we know is existing in throughout our police force. And our criminal justice system. So all of these have to be done at the same time. And that is what ultimately I think that the Justice Democrats are bringing to this progressive movement right now, is going in there with agreement that they really do all intersect. And I'm so excited to be moving forward on that. But I will say Medicare for all is the single most asked about issue when I'm out in any community by anybody, or people sharing their stories with me, their heart-wrenching stories about how healthcare is really destroying, ruining, or dampening their life to some degree. So that's got to be one of the top ones. We should be getting it here in California if we don't get it first federally.
Yeah, I was very disappointed the way that California decided to go with Medicare for all. Do you have a comment or a response to that situation there? Like, what went down? Did you hear anything? I mean, I know what we heard the official, responses were, but maybe you have inside information because it's your state.
Yeah, well, we've heard that basically it's been stopped by the Speaker Rendon in the House. I've heard people speculate that there was really a lot of grandstanding and kind of smoke and mirrors moving it from the Senate into the House in order to be able to say, hey, the Senate supports it, and then dump it on the House. Look, in politics, when it comes to working on legislation, there's a term that is frequently used, championing legislation. And that is different from voting for legislation or even co-sponsoring it. It is easy to put my name on a piece of legislation, but to champion it means I'm going to fight for getting it through. I'm going to fight for it behind the scenes. I'm going to fight for it in the front of the scenes. So this is what Bernie Sanders does with these town halls that he's had on Medicare for all and criminal justice and so forth. I think he had one other one. When you bring it to the public and you help educate people and you're spending your time and your resources to champion this policy and this movement and this issue, it's just a common term that is used in the political world. So what I have not seen is the Senate champion this legislation through the House and do everything they can to make sure that we can afford it, that we can figure it out, and that it should be passed, that we are forced to figure it out once it passes. We had the nurses union behind this, people showing us where we can in fact get the money, that some of the details have to be worked out afterwards once it gets brought back to the medical community. In terms of being able to afford it, one thing I'll say that isn't talked about enough here in my state is that when we talk about tax giveaways to corporations and the wealthy, it's done at the state level too. It's not just at the federal level. And at the state level here in California, we have billions of dollars that we are giving away through not having a true progressive tax structure, excuse me. And so that's where we can find the money to help bring back college for all is another really, really important one. We used to have publicly funded college here in California. We could have publicly funded college. We could have Medicare for all. We could expand housing and deal with our growing homelessness crisis here in California, which is gigantic. And I know this is spreading, throughout the country. But just speaking personally about what's happening right here, it's multiplied just in the last year. And so, I'm pretty disappointed about what happened for Medicare for all, but there is a growing, swelling swell movement essentially to get it passed here in the state. And I have hope for it if we keep up the pressure, and we will.
When you brought up, the environment, the people on the ground and how they feel about it, and you're getting this response. And when you're out there knocking on doors, when you're meeting people, it reminded me a lot of here in Maryland, Republican Governor Larry Hogan, who recently decided he wanted to, sign a bill for free community college. Now, there's certain criteria you have to meet, obviously, as far as how much you make per year, a family makes per year. But this is something he would have never talked about if he hadn't been pushed by challengers like Benjamin Jealous, and there's some other folks running as well. I happen to support Ben Jealous because I met him and I like his platform. But I'm also willing for someone to push him further left if there's somebody out there that can do that. But I totally get what you're saying when you say, this is why we run. It's also to force the issue. It's to get the conversation going. And once the toothpaste is out the tube, you can't put it back in. Once the public consciousness is like, hey, we want that. Like, you can't
unknow what you know.
There you go.
Yes.
So Alison, I'm open, man. So when you're in California, people are talking to you about Medicare or talking to you about healthcare. What's some other things that people are concerned with in California?
Police brutality is a really big one. This last weekend, I traveled to Bakersfield and Fresno, where those are pretty well known for being very conservative areas, although the demographics are seeming to start to change. And I learned something, and so candidates and legislators typically don't go to those areas here in blue California. So I was advised by a lot of people, don't bother. It's not necessarily expedient for your campaign, but I really want to get to as many areas as possible.
Why aren't they going there, Alison? Please explain. What's up?
Because you don't have as well, number one, it's not as blue. You have more red voters, especially in a primary. Right. And they're not concentrated city centers like San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego.
Easier to hit more people at one time than one local. You gotcha. And I get it. Please continue.
So I'm there in Bakersfield, and I learned from them about how bad police brutality is there. And I have not heard, and certainly people hear about this, but you don't hear people talking about police brutality in Bakersfield, California. You hear about it in a lot of the city centers, but people have not been talking in a large way. Like, there's been a lot happening in LA, there's been a lot happening in Sacramento and Oakland, but you don't hear about it in Bakersfield. And so a lot of times what happens is people in Northern California and Central California, where Bakersfield and Fresno are, they end up going more Republican because they feel like the Democrats in power ignore them. And so it was really important and fascinating for me to be there. And while, yes, Medicare for All was a big one we talked about, it was actually education reform, police brutality, and the environment that we talked about quite a bit there. Very
interesting.
Yeah.
Police reform in a conservative area. They're concerned about that.
Oh yeah. It's huge. And, actually we had people join our conversation, this event there, who supported Bernie Sanders and who supported Trump. And, we agreed that we're going to disagree on some issues and that we're not going to agree on all policies. And we started to have kind of a heated conversation about immigration. But when it comes down to ultimately, like when you really break down what we all want, which is to live peacefully and lovingly amongst each other, and that we really shouldn't be having to be divided by class, race, creed, religion. When you can get to that and help people start to, on that platform, agree that we really do have more in common than we don't, then you can start building from there on the policies that we need to implement to achieve that. And so I'm finding that that's possible no matter where I'm at.
Absolutely. I always say, start with what you can agree with, what issues we can agree on, and then we can talk about the other ones. We can do that civilly. We don't have to demonize one another while we do the process.
Yeah.
And sort of work it like that. I want to spend the rest of the time together because I know you're busy and you got a lot going on. I want to talk about your challenger or the incumbent, Miss Feinstein. Why should you replace her? And what is it about her record that made you so motivated to get in this?
What isn't it about her record? Look, going back to political corruption and money in politics, all you have to do is look at who funds her campaign, who's been funding her campaign, and you can just assume where she votes. And I promise you, your assumption will actually be correct. So she voted for the Iraq War. She voted for the Bush tax cuts. She voted to overturn Glass-Steagall, which essentially, broke up the big banks, or at least worked towards that. She is really a conservative in Democrats' clothing, and it is very well known amongst...
Hold on. I like that. You said a conservative in Democrats' clothing. Try not to alienate Republicans. Why do it? You don't have to. Yeah, that's there you go. Because they don't like fake people either. Like, the conservatives want you to be really conservative, be a conservative, or don't call yourself one. So I like that. Kudos to you, because I haven't heard anybody... usually we say rhino, but you're right. That's... or dino or
He's
whatever.
Dino.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Rhino,
He's a dino. Yeah. Well, the thing is that we know that there were a lot of Republicans who would have voted for Bernie Sanders. And it's because he was honest, and they didn't have to agree with all of his policies, but at least he wasn't a typical politician.
I thought it was because of Russia. I'm sorry, Alison. It was because of Russia. That's what they've been telling me for 2 years. That's what it
yes,
was.
I forgot.
It had nothing to do with his policies, like jobs and the economy and, income inequality, I should say.
Well, I promise you they're going to keep telling it to you for another 2 years as well. So you just brace yourself. But Dianne Feinstein, she's been in the U.S. Senate for a quarter of a century. She's been in office. She was mayor of San Francisco. So she's been in office in total for a half a century. And it's not as much that she's been in office for so long as she just hasn't progressed at all with the way that our entire society has progressed, and California in particular. And so it's time for the next generation, and it's time for us to have true representation, which means progressive representation, because California, by and large, the voters themselves are progressive. I don't care what party they align with. And so one of the things I consistently talk about is that we have to put politics and policy over party. I'm sorry, we have to put policy over party and policy over politics. Absolutely. And we have to put people over profit. And we know we hear that one, but this means that let's actually, like I was saying, let's talk about the policy. Let's talk about the issues. Let's set party aside, and we'll find out how much we actually agree on. She voted for the Patriot Act every single time, except for when she found out that NSA was spying on her. Then she championed that and stood up on the floor and yelled and gave an impassioned speech about how dare they do this to Congress, but voted for warrantless wiretapping in our own communities. And I know that conservatives and liberals, progressives, do not support that whatsoever. So, it's been one thing after another with her. I've been concerned quite a bit about her policies. I've been talking about them a bit in my class when I was teaching. And so I remember following this and feeling very disempowered, and frustrated, and feeling like, nothing was going anywhere. And so now I actually have a chance to stand up and make sure that we push the Democratic Party left, but also get there in office and open up the door for more progressives to run for office as well.
Hey, look, I think definitely people need to check you out. I think you have something to say. I think you've been around politics. You know the issues. I think you have a good grasp of the issues. I would like to switch to a lightning round real quick and just ask you a few questions and see what you think. What do you think about Gina Haspel being our new CIA director?
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. She should have been arrested. Now we're setting this precedent where a torturer and on top of that, let's not forget that she had these records destroyed. Mm-hmm. How is she not in prison? But now we're rewarding this behavior and calling it the law. So yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah, that is pretty disgusting. And then Alison, when they asked her a direct question like, would she torture again in the future, and she could not answer that very specific, very basic question. Okay, if you want to blame it on Bush, blame it on alcohol, fine. What are we going to do going forward? So that was my thing.
And we know that Trump supports torture. He wants to bring it back. He thinks that it works because he doesn't know how to read a book. And and here he, essentially nominates a war and torture monger, and we reward that behavior. It's sickening.
Wow, I thought I had more. I was just thinking off the top of my head what else has been going on. Oh, we had the Harry Meghan marriage, royal wedding. So all this right now, like all the black people are just great now because this happened. We're going to be lifted up as Americans, as Black Americans. And
all of a sudden, racism no longer exists.
There you go. That's what I
just like that. If only we knew it was that easy. This is what they used to do in the Middle Ages. They would just marry people from different communities in order to stop the fighting. So if only we knew that was what we could still do in 2018. Absolutely.
I'm looking here. That's really it. I'm trying to think. I wish I had my chat open. I know people are probably talking about some stuff that's been going on. I covered a couple of things. Well, I'll ask you a question that's just related to women. And, I hope no one says identity politics, but I mean, we keep it real. Have you faced any discrimination as you've been running? Have people taken you, well, gosh, you're trying to take the seat of another woman, so I guess not, right?
As soon as I ran, people immediately started accusing me of running just because I'm a woman.
Oh.
There's that. There's always, when it comes to sexism and racism, it's very subtle, as we know. And sometimes it's difficult as a person of some kind of minority community to try to figure out, is this personal? Is this because I'm a woman? Why is this really happening? And trying not to be oversensitive, but you definitely see ways in which people, and you can't ignore it, are treating you differently than they treat like a man in the same race. So yeah, I've definitely seen it. The way I'm expected to really kind of justify my experience or my positions more than other people. I don't know how much that's personal and how much that is being a woman necessarily, but I know that as soon as I launched, and it's still happening now, it's that question that you asked me. She's handpicked by Cenk Uygur. How could she possibly be thinking for herself? And they only did it because she's a woman, and they think that only a woman has a chance to take down Dianne Feinstein. And it's problematic, but I didn't get here by coasting through life easily. So, we just keep trudging forward.
It reminds me a little bit of black folks with Obama. They were like, well, he's black, of course you'd vote for him. But as a famous comedian said, yeah, he's black, we voted for him, but we wouldn't have voted for Flavor Flav. So
right.
I don't think Cenk or Justice Democrats, though, I differ with them on some things. Of course, I don't agree with anybody 100% of the time, not even myself. But, you know what I mean? Keep it real. But, I don't know, Alison. I don't think that Cenk or Justice Democrats would support you just because you were a woman. It would have to be something more to it than that. It's unfortunate people are idiots.
Well, I mean, all you have to do is just look at the number of men who have been supported in Justice Democrats. I mean, it's obnoxious. I don't support identity politics either. I'm very disturbed with what happened in regards to identity politics between Bernie and Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. It blows my mind that we're still having conversations like this in 2018, where, if we are serious that we want to stamp out discrimination and we really want to see the person for who they are, then we should be voting for people for who they are. At the same time, it's not that easy, because it is important that you have people from the communities representing their own communities. So I don't want Congress to be filled with a bunch of white men speaking on behalf of fighting for my right to have control over my own body. I need a woman in there to be able to explain that. I don't want a bunch of white men going in there and talking about sexism and how we have to protect our women. That needs to be gone too. And I know that, our communities of color don't need a bunch of white people, men or women, speaking on behalf of the issues that they're facing in their communities. We absolutely need people in each of our communities to represent, and also what that does too, I know firsthand in the school that I taught in, when you have somebody, and this is just psychology, if you have somebody that you can identify with actually representing as a leader in what's possible, it motivates a child to see what they're also capable of. That really is important. So it's kind of a mixed bag, like everything in life. It's not an easy cut and dry answer necessarily. But partisan I guess it would boil down to this: that we should never vote for somebody just because they're a Democrat or just because they're a Republican. We should not vote for somebody just because they're a woman or just because they're a man or just because they're white or just because they're black or just because they're brown. But if we can look at people and make sure that they're good on policy and good on character and good on experience, and you can identify with them in your community and they can be a real leader from your community, that is gigantic for us.
You know what?
And have true representation.
Absolutely. One point I'd like to add to that, because I think a lot of people leave this out, that the class matters. Like, just because somebody looks like you or they have the same sex organs, does that mean that they relate to you from a financial standpoint? So like I could vibe with someone who's Asian, who grew up similar to me, who's from a working class family like I am, than I can a black guy who grew up in Beverly Hills. I mean, that does exist. So sometimes I think that needs to be added to the conversation, that we don't need a bunch of millionaires like, lording over us. We need people like you come from a working class background, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See what I'm saying? And that means you're gonna relate more to some of your constituents who come from that.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I talk about that quite a bit, actually, that it's essentially the wealthy elite class that is ruling over us. And that is, by and large, the problem, even more than money in politics, but it's money in politics that got them there. So you either have to be a millionaire or no millionaires in order to run in office or to serve in office at this point. Exactly. And it goes round and round. And so what you have is, the way corruption works is it's not just money in politics, to me, is that it's a corruption of your perception of reality. It corrupts your mind. And so when you sit there in office as a wealthy person, you cannot possibly empathize with those you're truly representing, which is the masses and the working classes. And so you're legislating to pass legislation that governs us, but you have no idea what it's like to decide whether you're going to pay for your medicine or put gas in your car. And so because of that, we need more people from our working classes to actually represent us. And there are states in our country that have proven that this truly works. The state of Maine is an example because of having publicly funded elections, which is what we really need. We need publicly funded elections to replace privately funded elections, which would help to level the playing field and allow more of us to run for office and be truly represented, not, like you said, not just by identity, but really by the actual classes that make up and build our country.
Last question in the lightning round. I know we went on another way. Hillary Clinton received an award from Harvard today for transformative. Do you think she deserved that award?
I didn't hear about that. What was it exactly?
Yeah, transformative impact.
For transformative impact, yes. Okay. Well, she did have a transformative impact in stealing the election from Bernie Sanders.
Oh, man, Alison, you killed that.
Should I apologize? I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect. Look, guys, totally unscripted. Unscripted. First time I ever spoke to her. This is her off the cuff. Alison, you killed it. That's amazing. All right, I told you 40 minutes. Thank you so much for your time. Alison, tell people where to go to find out more about you and your campaign.
All right, everybody, please check me out at AlisonHartson.com. It's AlisonHartson. You can read more about my platform, get involved, volunteer. We have over 1,800 volunteers. We need more. Help me knock on doors, help make phone calls. Votes are already going out, and reach out. Follow me on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram. My handle is the same on every platform. It's Hartson4CA. 4 is spelled out FOR.
Hartson4. So Alison with one S, right?
One L.
One L.
And one S.
One L and one S.
One of everything.
Okay. Guys, go to AlisonHartson.com. You can find her at Alison Hartson4CA. That's California. And find out more about her campaign and see what she's got going on. Volunteer if you can. Get involved. Thank you, Alison, for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you.
And you know it, guys. That's it. That'll do it for us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow when my guest will be. She's running for governor. She's with the Green Party. We don't discriminate. I want to have her on the show. She'll be here. Constance for Ohio. Give it up, guys. This show has been brought to you by Just Inform. Go to justinform.com, a social media site that will not censor you and block you and hamstring you. Social media done right.